All right, coming up next is Allie Laura. Lauer.
Lauer.
Lauer. There we go. Allie Lauer. Her session is going to be on advocacy and telling decision makers your library story in their language. Now, the freedom fighters talk about this all the time, how important it is we need to get into the business of telling our story. So listen very carefully to this wonderful presentation. And Allie, I'm going to give you hosting rights and you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Casey, for organizing this. And thank you to all the presenters for sharing your awesome insights. I've learned a lot and enjoyed everything so far. I've also been really impressed with the way Casey scheduled this, because there are a bunch of presentations today on advocacy. And I wonder if she did that on purpose. I'm guessing that she did. So if you're interested in this topic, you're going to find that other people today are also kind of building on this. And so I think we're going to have a good conversation this afternoon about advocacy in general. And hopefully the presentations will build on each other. But I'd like to share with you an idea that sort of came to fruition with me this spring, and it's very new, but just a different way of thinking about how we might advocate with our administrators. But before we get into that too much, I'm going to take more of a global view of how we share our stories. And first I'll introduce myself. So I'm Allie Lauer. I've been in education for 22 years, most of that as a high school English teacher, and that is going to inform a little bit of my perspective on this topic today. I've been a teacher librarian at a middle school for 4 years, and here are my socials. I'd love to interact with you. This will be up again at the end if you want to say hi to me. I would love that. But as we start to think about the topic of advocacy, I just want to invite everyone today to first think about who most needs to hear your library story. And although I'm going to focus today on administrators and decision makers, that may or may not be your group that needs to most hear your library story. You may have another audience that's more important in your context right now. So please take a moment to think about who your primary audience is. And obviously we want to speak to all the members of our community, but maybe there's a few that you want to focus on at this time. So here are some options. Maybe you're thinking about your students, their parents, your colleagues, other librarians, such as the people on this call, administrators, leadership, legislators, community members. There's lots of different people that we can be sharing our story with. And I'd like to just suggest today that depending on who that audience is, your content and your form is going to change and kind of flex with the audience that you're focusing on. So here is I'd like to do a little Mentimeter, and there's a QR code. You know, I meant to get the tab so I could also put that in the chat. So let me do that for you also real quick. Okay. So here is also, if you'd prefer to do it that way, there's the link, and the QR code will also be on the next slide. Got to get this all organized here. Okay, here we go. So as we start to, look, people have already voted. Thank you so much for your participation. So depending on where you are and what your situation is, who most needs to hear your library story right now? And there's no right or wrong answer. It really is very contextual. And as you can see as people are voting, you're here for a conversation about administrators and leaders, so it makes sense that that category has a lot of votes, but obviously all the categories are important. So we can see, I'll give it another few seconds as we continue to vote. Co-workers at our site is also an important category. So we might want to think, although I'm not going to focus on that so much today, how our co-workers might need to hear our library story. It's another thing to reflect on. So please continue to vote. If I have time, I'll come back and see where we ended up with this at the end of the presentation. But for now, we're definitely interested in the topic of our administrators. Oops, what did I do? Okay. Well, bear with me for a second. I was trying to be fancy, and maybe I was a little too fancy for myself. I gotta stop sharing for a second. Sorry about that. Okay, boop, boop, boop. All right, back to y'all. Okay, that is not what I wanted. Sorry, guys. Living and learning.
There you go.
Okay, so as many of you voted, reaching our administrators and leadership is an important priority for us, and showing, so what I kind of was coming to think about this spring is how much time do we spend thinking about what their goals are rather than focusing on our own goals? And I'm not trying to say anything about our goals not being important, because our goals are very important and we're often the only one thinking about some of our goals. So no, I'm not trying to throw any shade on our goals. They're very important, but do we spend any time also thinking about the goals our administrators have and how we might kind of respond to those goals in such a way that would encourage them to increase their partnership with us and raise our profile as librarians? So why is it important to focus on telling our story to our leaders? Well, obviously, you already think that based on that Mentimeter, but here are some things I've come up with. Our administrators are influencing staffing and budgeting decisions at local, district, and state levels. This is a matter of equity, and if we really value that, then we need our administrators to be going to bat for us on these matters. We also want to make sure that everyone knows how important librarians are in affecting student outcomes. There's a lot of research on this. Not a lot of people seem to know about it outside of school librarians. We also want to position ourselves as team players with our administrators and other team members so that they see us as their partners who really are trying to seek the good of the student outcomes. And if you have any other reasons of why we should be telling our story to our leaders, please feel free to drop them in the chat now. We'll take a second and just see if anyone wants to add anything that maybe I didn't think of that would be helpful. Okay, a couple things. We've got a couple things. Thank you, Katie. We are the ones who need to hear our story. That's a very good point. Thank you for that. So yes, Allison, they're dictating our schedule. So yeah, we want them to be thinking about how to be making effective decisions on that. We want them to influence how we are able to collaborate with others. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, we definitely need everyone to come into the 21st century on how libraries are and what they can offer, right? Okay, so moving on to the next slide. Oops, sorry guys. Okay, so all of those things are important to me. Also, I want to share these particular things that are very specific to my context. I'm in the state of California, and California persistently is at the bottom, near the bottom of professional library staffing ratios, as you can see here. In my district specifically, not very many elementary schools have access to teacher librarians unless those schools happen to be span schools. Aside from that, they mostly don't have teacher librarians. There is no guaranteed budget in my district for funding, and that creates a really inequitable situation in the libraries across the campus. So across the district. So some that have more money have better libraries. It's not equitable. And obviously, as we all know, not very many people really understand our work and what we're doing, and that includes our colleagues, right? So I have a 4-point plan, a 4-point kind of like method of how we might go about reaching our decision makers that I put into action this spring I'd like to share with you. So first, as we're thinking about the leaders that we most want to reach, what's our specific audience? Are we thinking about our principal or assistant principals, the school leadership? Are we thinking about our district leadership, the state, a combination of some kind? So kind of focus down on who it is you're most wanting to influence. And from there, choose your prompt. And here's my English language arts experience coming into play. What strategic plan is that person operating with? Do they have a mission or a vision statement that they've committed to that they're like touting? Are there school accreditation documents that ask for certain things to happen at your campus that could possibly be looked at as a place for you to start? Or maybe there's some other kind of goal setting happening, but what is the documents that kind of explain what that leader values or what that leader is trying to achieve? And then once we know what that is and think of that as your prompt, then you want to unpack the prompt, right? You want to study it. You want to think about, now not all of this is going to relate to the library, and nor should it, but some of it will. So how can we as librarians best support parts of that plan that will make that leader more effective and reaching their own goals? And there may be many things that apply, so we have to focus. What are a couple priorities that you can choose from that'll be most efficacious for you at this time? And then here's my librarian side coming into play. I created an organizer that helped me both analyze the plan and as my prompt, and then also to help me gather my evidence. And what did that look like? So here's an example. So in my school district, I teach for LA Unified. We have a relatively new district superintendent, and he's put out a strategic plan. He has flogged that thing all around the community. I think it's a good plan, but the principals and everybody are talking about it all the time. Like, how are we meeting the strategic plan? How are we meeting the strategic plan? And so it just became apparent to me that the more I could help my principal meet the goals of the superintendent's strategic plan, the more valuable I would be as an asset to him in his work. So when I share this document with you, you'll get it's just a blank T-chart, which I'm sure you can make yourself, but it'll save you a little time. So there's a T-chart, and it's literally just on the left, you put the priorities of your leader, whatever they are, whatever goals you decided to choose and focus on. And then on the right, over time, over the year, over the months, whatever time frame you're operating with, you just gather examples of the work you're doing that demonstrates your value and your support of those particular priorities. I'll show you real quick my completed one, and this is also linked, so you can look at this if it's helpful. It probably will be nonsense to most people who aren't me, because it's very much just my own internal notes. But you can see that I just went through and thought about everything I had done, and I included the numbers of participants that would kind of contribute to each element of that part of the strategic plan. So for example, here, designing and sustaining safe and welcoming inclusive learning environments. What did I do? And I had a lot of things here, and the bold ones were the ones that ended up making my report, but there were a lot of things that I could have included. And so I had to kind of pare down my evidence and decide what would be the best and most convincing way to show that that was being supported in my library. So make your plan. You pick the document that you're helping your administrator or your leader achieve, and then what do you want to focus on, and then where are your programs already servicing those objectives, and maybe if there are things you could add that would help service it better. That this is the beginning of the year; it's a good time to reflect on that. So then our next step is then to collect. I did a lot of this at the end of the year, and I regretted that. So this is my word to myself as well as to you, that if we collect evidence over time, over the year, we'll find the process of sharing it out easier. So I'm planning to do this monthly, to put a time in my schedule every month where I go through and look at this organizer and think about what activities, programs, and services I have provided that would support those elements of the strategic plan in my district. And again, you want to focus, because it might be a very lengthy document you're working from. So stay focused on a few things. But if you have really good evidence of some other element you didn't think of, well, maybe as that unfolds over the year, you could add that as a bonus. I am planning to use links and folders in my Google Drive, because I'm definitely a Google Drive person. To create pockets where I can hold all that evidence, pictures and everything, so that I have it when I need it. I'm going to pause here for a second, because I see there's a few raised hands. So we can pause for questions. Angela, did you have a... No? Okay, I thought there was a question. And Eileen, did you have a question?
I think those are from earlier.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I just got a notice right now, so I apologize. Okay.
We have some in the Q&A though, I think.
Okay, well, maybe we could stop there for a second and see. Those are, so Michelle, I see your comments. I'm gonna have to come back to that later because I won't be able to direct you to those locations right at this moment. But we'll come back to that before we leave. Okay. All right, so evidence. What can evidence look like? We're used to, and at least in my school, we're used to thinking of evidence only as test scores and assessment data, and that's important. And maybe you have some that values your work as a librarian. That for me is less connected to the work that I do because there isn't an assessment that's really measuring so much of what my work looks like. That may not be the case for you. But here are some evidence types that I think are going to be most useful for me. So you can look at this list here, you know, how the numbers of participants in my programs, the types of programs I'm providing, the number of and types of collaborations. I do an annual library survey and I try to get at least, this year I got 44% of the school to respond, which was a big deal for me. So using that feedback is helpful. But you may have informal feedback from other places, such as notes from parents or lesson data, evidence of student learning, and other things, as you can see. And I thought maybe take a moment and just drop in the chat what your favorite form of evidence is of your work. The thing that you like to point to when people ask how it's going in the library, like, is there something like maybe it's the number of people using your makerspace this week, or I mean, circulation data is always something that we talk about. But what is there anything else? If you'd like to drop your favorite example in the chat of something that you like to keep track of, help us all learn, that would be great. Pictures of students, yes. Collaborations with other teachers, definitely. I'm getting requests for my survey. I'll see if I can make a copy of that and put it in Casey's one pager when we get to there. Participation in program, yes, and then social media. Thank you. Yeah, number of classes taught. Those are all really valuable sources of data. So thank you everyone who participated. Yeah, if you have security gates that are helping you track, that's a great piece of data. I love that. Okay, so then of course your next step is to find a creation tool that fits your audience. We're going to hear from James in a minute about Google Looker Studio, I think it's called. I've never used it. I'm excited to learn from him. We learned about Adobe Express. That's another tool that our previous presenter shared. A lot of us use Canva, or it could be a social media, but whatever creation tool is going to best help you reach your audience, that's what you should use. And then remembering to honor your audience's time by focusing on just a few examples of the way your library is contributing to the goals that your administrator is valuing. One way I do that is I try to focus on images and limit text. So like, I don't write sentences, I don't write paragraphs, it's like phrases and pictures. That's almost entirely what my reports look like. And so what will help make my design easy to consume? My administrator is busy. If he even looks at my report, that's a miracle. So I want to keep it short. And in my case, and this is just kind of like bonus, but I made the formatting in terms of the colors match the strategic plan of my district. And that was just like me being nerdy. I don't even know if anyone will care about that, but it was something fun for me to try to show my connection to the strategic plan. So here's a little bonus. If you use Canva, I'm sure you already know that you can copy and resize a document that you've done. So since you're doing all this work anyway, why not create your document and then copy and resize it into another format and then edit the heck out of it and use it for another audience. So and you're gonna get my report at the end. I'm gonna share this, and the bit.ly includes both of my reports, so you can look at them if you like. So on the left, I have like a 26 slide presentation. And now I know very few people are going to click through there, but I mostly did that for me. I wanted to see the data of how I was respecting and responding to the strategic plan. So I made the whole thing. I tried to address every area of the strategic plan that I could, but I knew realistically that people weren't going to look at that. So then what I did is I did a copy and resize in Canva. and I told it I want 8.5 by 11. And then I just edited it heavily, very, very heavily. That allowed me to preserve some of the formatting and the coloring. As you can see, like I had that, the graphics and the colors are the same. I was able to retain the pictures, and then I just deleted almost everything and was left with, you know, what are, I think, the things that are going to be most useful for my colleagues to know. I was thinking of my colleagues when I made the one pager. So that was a way for me to kind of like double my impact by taking the original document and then shrinking it down and editing it so that other people might possibly get a use out of it. And at the bottom, I did include a link that said, for the entire analysis, click here. So if anyone, you know, what their appetite was whetted by that, then maybe they would look into it further. But I'm not counting on that, but given how busy folks can be. So that's another tip for me, from me to you. Hopefully that helps us. And then obviously the last step is to share. So you want to think about, well, what format's going to be most useful to share with my audience? And how can I share in a regular and sustainable way? Monthly, quarterly? I mean, I have not always been good. I try to do social media posts very regularly, like once a week, but in terms of reporting out data in a more thoughtful way that's connected to the goals of my district, I haven't done that as much. So I'm making goals to do that better this year, and not just at the end of the year, because, you know, people get busy and they may not even have a chance to look at it. So how can I do that regularly, just to reinforce the importance of the work that we're doing as librarians and the value that we're adding to our district? So here are some you know, obvious places you might consider sharing. And then, as always, try to cross post. So if you created something in one social media platform, maybe you could also email it or put it on another platform or put it on your website. That way the work, you know, gets to more audiences. So anyway, that's my very brief kind of like, here's what I tried this year. Maybe it's a thought that could benefit others. So I wish you all the best in your advocacy journey, and thank you for listening. I know, you know, we were getting a lot of good stuff in this conference, and thank you for being here and sticking with me. And I'd love to hear from you on social media if you'd like to correspond with me. So at this point, I'm gonna
We have about 3 minutes, but I do want to say something to you that is worth looking into. When you get your test scores, go back and look at your frequent students that come to the library and see look and see where their growth is. And then you highlight that with your administrator. Only select the kids that are your frequent, you know, attendees, because you know, you can attest to, well, this kid, you don't want to name the you know, the exact title of the book, but you know, you want to say this kid has checked out a lot of books, and you don't want to, you know, give away the exact titles. Your principal might push and say, well, what exactly are they reading? You could say, well, they're a heavy fiction reader, and then just leave it generically like that, right? And just talk about this kid has made growth, and now and say that I'm not 100% behind this, but I'm on the team that has helped this child make the advancement. So, you know, this is the reason why you need to continue to give me funding so I can have those materials, so independent reading takes place, and you know how to take that spiel from there with that discussion. Also, looking your Q&A, you had a couple of questions like, what's your advice for getting actual FaceTime with the key players? That's always a struggle, always. What have you done to get that FaceTime, Allie?
I'm like the worst person to ask about that right now, because I have a new principal who I haven't really, it's been difficult. It's been difficult to network with him. I had a really, I hope he doesn't.
Yeah, I have a new principal too. I
Anyway,
haven't met her yet.
He's a nice guy, but it's just, I don't know, we just haven't connected as much.
Yeah.
So my previous principal and I would sit down regularly. In terms, I mean, my district is large, so the key, there's no way I could get FaceTime with anyone at the district office, but we have local districts. So I do, like, I sent them my report I tweet out to my local district on Twitter, and they're very responsive. So even though I can't get my big district, I mean, we have like 800,000 students in my district, right? So it's huge. I can't get any love from the big district, but my local district will respond to me. So I just focus on that. I focus on the people who are responding to me.
Yeah.
But Casey, I thank you so much for that suggestion. I did write it down as you were sharing. I was like, that's a great idea.
And that
a
came
lot
from
of my
a principal,
library,
believe it or not. A principal once just dropped that idea in my lap, and I was like, oh, she was trying to help me. So I'm like,
it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Like for me, like a lot of people who use my library are not necessarily reading, they're doing other things. So I'm like, I'll look at my circ data and see who the big readers are and use that as to go fishing for their reading, improvement. But
they are library users, so
yes,
you talk about readers, library users, computer users, it goes on and on. Katie asked this question, do you have any examples of effective survey questions?
There's a lot of interest in my survey. I should have presented on that. It's kind of a long survey. It takes 20 minutes, and I only get buy-in because I badger my English teachers to help me with it, and they love me, so they do that, and that's the only way I can get as much participation as I get. But I mean, I'm asking because I want to find out what the attitudes toward reading are in my school. Not just their library use, but their attitudes toward reading. So I do ask questions like, do you consider yourself a reader? I ask questions about how much time they spend reading. I ask about what genres they like. I wasn't really prepared to go into detail about that right now. So it's a little fuzzy for me at the moment, but I mean, I guess I would say if you're interested in that process, just think about what information would most help you to support your teachers and your students. What information do you need? And then craft questions around that. I'm happy to include a link to I'm gonna write that down too. I'll put a link to my survey in the one pager that we're doing with Casey. So if that helps, yeah, I definitely will do that, Katie. Yeah, okay. I'm not gonna share I don't want people putting their stuff in there and my data, but I try to use the same form every year so that I can see changes over time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, thank you everybody for your participation, your interest, and for being here. And are there any last questions? I think we have 1 minute.
Make sure that you give us some love in the chat as well as on social media. This was an excellent presentation, a lot to think about. Thank you, Lauer.
Thank you, Casey.
Excuse me, Lauer.
It's okay. You're fine.
Thank you so much for your presentation today and taking time out on a busy Saturday. Bye now.
Thank you.